My name is Ahmed Adia and welcome to my presentation. Today's topic will be regarding stakeholders and effective means of communication. We'll be looking at a current live project. The University of Greenwich and Kent's Medway campus is based at the old military estate in Gillingham. The current project is of a rehabilitation of a disused military swimming pool and is a work in progress. The project is known as C4, and not only does it include the swimming pool but also the plot of land surrounding the building. This incorporates the university gym and the old rifle range. The universities of Medway are owned by Chatham Maritime Trust. This includes 3 different universities: the University of Greenwich, the University of Kent and the Canterbury Christ Church University. This makes this project unique as it is a joint venture between members of Greenwich and Kent universities. Both would have their own budgets, which means 2 different funding streams. Both would have an input into, and pleasing 2 clients is harder than pleasing 1. The project is just to change the building from its current status into a modern common room for students at both universities. Now that you have had a brief introduction to the site, I will move on to the topic of discussion, which is stakeholders. When talking about relevant stakeholders, we have to first understand what stakeholders are and how they will impact the project. The Dictionary of Oxford's description can be as simple as denoting a type of organisation or system in which all of the members or participants are seen as having an interest in its success. Or as Albert Lester describes it, as almost any person or organisation with an interest in a project can be deemed as a stakeholder. This is important as it shows that not all stakeholders have a positive effect or view towards a project and that negative feedback is reality. The success of any project rests on its ability to develop and maintain effective and continuing relationship with its stakeholders. Communication in its various forms acts as a primary source used to build lasting relationships and partnerships. It is the art and science to structure and transmit information in a manner that is easily understood. The involvement of stakeholders are of high priority to a project manager. They allow him or her to use these to benefit the project. It provides a chance to view and review ideas put forward. This allows them to consider or reconsider something which may have only just been brought to their attention, or something that may need overlooking from the original idea. Stakeholders can have a positive and negative effect on the project manager due to the influx of feedback. The project manager should aim to approach their feedback respectively. Unless a stakeholder provides a ludicrous idea in which cannot be achieved in reality, then it is of best practice to take these ideas and try to expand upon them. However, not everyone can be pleased, as no 2 people are the same. But trying to manage expectations should be the core principle behind dealing with stakeholders. As stakeholders play a fundamental factor to each project, it is vitally important to keep them up to date as to what may be happening on the project and how it is progressing. An example could be whether practical completion could be met in next date, or whether there's going to be any delays due to change in design, for example. This is because some stakeholders may be interested in a project from a more financial point of view. This person could be funding the project or funding parts of the project, whilst others come from a more emotional background. They could be, for example, affected by the ongoing work surrounding the local area. Now, due to the fact that there are a plethora of stakeholders from different backgrounds, each having a vested interest in the project and coming from different perspectives, communicating with these groups can seem to be a daunting task. However, being in the 21st century, with the advancement we have in technology, communicating has never been more convenient and simple. Each of these parties will require different forms of communication. This is quite simply due to the fact that not all stakeholders can be found in one place, and not all of them have the same kind of impact on a project. Some will have a higher standing than others. Construction project stakeholders can be broken up into 3 types. These are project-based. This is where somebody or a stakeholder could play an integral part to the construction process or anywhere along it. An end user could be the people who occupy the building after completion. And there's the layered section, which could involve third parties and legislative authorities. Deciding key stakeholders and selecting those with higher priority can be determined by their level of interest against their level of influence. This is relevant to the ongoing project. An example of this will be a neighbour next to a construction site takes an interest, but as they are not integral to the build, their level of influence won't be as high. Therefore, informing them via local circular letters, for example, would be helpful and provide more than enough information. On the other hand, you could have a client who is funding a project and having a massive influence as well as interest. So a more in-depth approach will need to be met. In order to identify an effective means of communicating with stakeholders linked to the C4 project, we must analyse who our stakeholders are and then go on to talk about strategic means of communication. So I hope you have your pen and paper ready. The before mentioned types come under 2 categories and 4 subcategories. The first category being internal stakeholders. Being named internal, we can already determine that this group would be tied into the project from inception to completion and during occupation. This category is mainly client-based and links back to him and those who he has empowered. Under internal, we have 2 subcategories, demand and supply. Within the C4 project, the demand side would include members such as the relevant funding bodies. As mentioned before, on this project there are more than one funding body, so both universities will be needed to take into account when communicating. This group would hold a high level of both interest and influence, and this makes them key holders and key players, and keeping them informed is essential, as well as keeping them satisfied. During each stage of the project, there should come a point where meetings can be held in order to provide feedback to the funding bodies. These meetings don't just have to be verbal, but can be backed up by handouts and the use of PowerPoint. This allows information to be put across in a clear manner and help avoid any misinterpretation. Of course, a negative effect of this could be that certain members may not show up to these meetings. However, as they are the funding source of the project, it is vital to keep communication throughout the duration of the project. This is so that they understand that their money is being put to something worthwhile. This can be done via emails to the heads of the financial department or simple phone calls. As C4 is based on a university campus and also is going to be used as a university common room, it is important to realise the main end user. These are the people who will be using the building on a daily basis. These are quite obviously the students. The excitement surrounding new facilities for students can be overwhelming, as they like to feel they are being made a priority and their voices, they would like them heard. And to keep in touch with them can be important touch to keep them integral to the project. The students have access to university portal in which they can be updated about what is new and ongoing in and around the university. A small article each month can be produced and be an extremely useful tool in which the students can be kept up to date. In the modern day, social media tools such as Twitter and Facebook could always update students. Nowadays, almost everyone has a smartphone or access to the internet, so even a sentence or two interacting with students can be done at ease. However, not all students may be a part of social media, so how will they be kept in the light? The use of posters placed around the university notice board can also be a good informative tool. Most universities today have student representatives and student unions. This can be extremely helpful as students can voice their opinion through them. As a new building would include a canteen bar, the operators and kitchen staff and also the cleaners will be considered as stakeholders. They will need to take into account the access for deliveries, the space for work, the storage and on-site facilities. They also form a part of the end user group, as they would also be there on a daily basis. As a university may already have contracts with catering and cleaning companies, then they would also know how the build is progressing. Prior to this, a site meeting may be a viable option in order to understand the wants and needs in order to have an efficient running canteen. They can also, during this period, work out how they would like to have the seating arrangements and the counters set up. This helps to minimize delay. They may have already a high level of interest, but not a very high level of influence. yet they will still need to be kept informed. The end user doesn't just contain the students and caterers, but also those who help in the running and the maintenance of the building. This includes individuals such as Richard Cotton, who at the University of Greenwich Medway's campus is the facilities manager and also the internal project manager for this build. He would need to understand everything about the new building, because if anything shall go faulty, then he would be responsible in order to rectify faults, or where to go to get it to be rectified. As Mr. Cotton is also the internal project manager, he would already be liaising with various parties, making sure the job runs smoothly. He would also have access to a mobile phone, ensuring that communication or getting in touch with him is only as easy as a phone call away. Should there be more than one person involved, then the use of conference calling can be utilised. Regular emails between us and Mr. Cotton should be written and should clear up any issues, should there be any, or simply just to update each other on how the build is going. Both levels of influence and interest are high, making him or any of his team members key players in this project. Finally, if the building was hired out for private functions by members of the public, then they may pose an interest as to how they can get the best use of their space during their use in the off-peak periods. This will pose as a challenge, as their user is an unknown entity and cannot be targeted directly. We will now take a look into the supply part of the internal stakeholder category. In order to execute the build successfully, a great deal of liaising would be expected between the project managers and the supply side of the internal stakeholders. This category includes most of the individuals directly related to the build, such as the design team, which includes architects, engineers, interior designers. They will from the start need to be informed of what the building's intended use is, or anything that needs to be included or excluded from the design. Constant communication is vital at this stage, as it is when the client will bring his ideas to the table and allow the design team to generate a key concept idea from which they can evolve. The design team would be designing the structure. As the design team would be designing the structure, there will need to be communication from the start. The formal method of holding meetings shall be the most effective way of establishing what is expected. Throughout the duration, email and simple lunch meetings can be held to update, manage expectation, mitigate risk and provide feedback. As the main contractor has taken responsibility of the build, it is apparent that a large chunk of communicating will be done with him. Any of the subcontractors on site would also need to know the program of work and be informed of any delays or changes. This communication should lay between the main contractor and the subcontractor. It is vital that the project manager and main contractors liaise on a daily basis. This could be done when both are on site informally. Breakdown in communication could lead to delays or even worse. That is why this is of a high priority. Emails or phone calls can be made in their absence. However, should these fail, then the good old-fashioned voicemail can play a key communication role. The main contractor is also a key player in terms of interest and influence. As cost forms one of the three major factors to a successful project, the client would also be kept up to date on cost factors and budgeting. For this, the quantity surveyor will become a stakeholder, as they will need relevant access to site and information. This helps them to carry out their valuations. Through these interim valuations, dependent on the form of contract, can help break down the cost of the quantity of work or lack of. This is usually done on a monthly basis via a report issued to the client. For this section of internal supply stakeholders, we have the suppliers of material and plant, or plant hire. Without these groups being informed of what is needed and by when, the project could be vastly delayed or may even come to a standstill for a period of time. During this period of time, the materials could get manufactured or delivered, especially if the item is bespoke. Majority of these stakeholders hold high interest and influence from the construction team. As this will be their bread and butter, majority of them will take the project very seriously, trying to establish a business relationship whilst earning a good reputation. The category that follows is external stakeholders. External stakeholders consist of people or organizations outside of the project zone. but are still associated with the project. Two subcategories for external stakeholders are legislative and private or third party. This will become clearer as we go on. Under legislative comes external bodies such as the Health and Safety Executive, local government or council. Especially as we are dealing with a listed building, the council would want to make sure that none of the original design is compromised. This could also include schemes such as Considerate Construction Scheme or Construction Skills Certification Scheme. These stakeholders have no general interest in the success of the project, but rather that legislation and regulations are met throughout the project. This group may hold a low level of interest due to the fact that there are many ongoing projects within the vicinity. However, these stakeholders hold a high level of influence. Therefore, communication in regards to how the project is progressing isn't vital for this group. But information regarding the project as a whole will need to be provided. This is a form of communication needed by the relevant bodies in order to allow work to progress and to be signed off. It allows the regulatory bodies to keep track of the people on site if the people are on site are deemed competent and are doing things in a best practice with the least disruption to the environment. In simple terms, it is best to keep them satisfied as they can make it difficult to progress. At this point, it is important to say that should stakeholders are not kept satisfied, they can also go against you. The last group in the external subcategory is a third party or private. This category of stakeholders have no interest in the project from an end user perspective, but would have a considerable amount of interest for more of a personal view. This is important as any form of negativity from this group could lead to complications. As this building is built on an ex-military estate, there are no domestic houses or dwellings within the immediate area, so there is a less likely chance that the project manager will receive any complaints due to disruption. Would this have been a college or a school, then the lecturers or teachers may have come under this category. However, as this is a university, there is doubt that the lecturers will take interest as each individual is responsible for their own learning, should they decide to spend time in a common room rather than attending lessons. Again, with this group of stakeholders, informing them will suffice, as these individuals require minimal effort. This is because they lack influence. However, they may have a high interest and legitimate power. So in order to keep them happy, informing them of decisions that may affect them personally would be deemed viable. However, minimal effort is required as the level of interest and influence is low. From this presentation, we understand that stakeholders play a vital role in the success of any project. They consist of individuals and organizations who can have a positive and negative effect. As they can have such an effect on a project, understanding their wants, needs, and managing their expectations becomes a fundamental part to an ongoing project. In order for this to be executed successfully, research should be done into who the stakeholders are for that project. This is done by breaking it down into groups of internal and external under the subheadings of supply, demand, and legislative and third party. Once the key stakeholders are identified, a strategy of communicating with these stakeholders should be made. This is done by comparing their level of interest against their level of influence. This will help determine the level of effort needed to address them, as some may need minimal effort or information, while others are held as key players. Key players will be expected to attend meetings and video calls, while others can liaise via email and phone calls. End users can be informed by unions or social media. Legislative stakeholders could be informed only of what they require, and the ones who require minimal effort may only need a small informal conversation or even just power posters or handouts. This concludes my presentation, and I hope this has been informative. Thank you for your attention.